Welcome to my channel. Let's dive into a new story and find out what came after love. I knew something was wrong the moment my wife laughed at his joke. Not because the joke was funny, it wasn't. Not because she laughed too loudly, she didn't. It was worse than that. She laughed softly, carefully. The kind of laugh you give someone when you don't want everyone to notice how much attention you're paying them. And that was the first time that night I realized my wife wasn't sitting at that company dinner with me. She was sitting there for him. Her name was Emily. We had been married for 8 years. From the outside, we looked like a good couple, stable, respectable. The kind of marriage people assume is fine because nothing dramatic ever happens in public. And maybe that was part of the problem. We had become very good at looking normal, especially her. Emily worked for a large consulting firm downtown, the kind of place where everyone spoke in polished sentences, wore expensive watches, and smiled like they were always being evaluated. Every few months, they hosted dinners for senior staff, clients, and spouses. I had been to enough of them to know the routine. Shake hands, smile, remember names, laugh at jokes that were not funny, pretend the room wasn't full of people silently measuring each other. I never loved those events. Emily did. She understood that world better than I did. She knew how to move through a room, when to laugh, when to listen, when to make people feel important. That night was supposed to be just another dinner. Nothing unusual. At least, that's what I thought when we arrived. She looked beautiful, more than usual, not just dressed up, prepared. There's a difference. She had spent almost 2 hours getting ready, changing earrings twice, asking which dress looked more natural, even though nothing about the effort was natural. I remember watching her in the mirror while she adjusted her hair. "You nervous?" I asked. She didn't look at me. "No, why? You just seem focused." She smiled at her reflection. "Big night." That was all she said. At the restaurant, everything was exactly how I expected it to be. Private room, low lighting, white tablecloths, expensive wine. People standing in small groups, pretending they weren't forming ranks. Emily became a different person the second we walked in. Not fake exactly, just elevated, sharper. Warmer with everyone else than she had been with me in months. That was something I had been trying not to think about. The months. Because the truth is, things had already been different before that night. She had been coming home later. Not dramatically later, just late enough. An hour here, 2 hours there. Always with an explanation. Client call, last-minute meeting, team review, work dinner. And every explanation was reasonable. That's how it starts. Not with obvious lies, with reasonable ones. Her phone had changed too. She used to leave it anywhere. Kitchen counter, bathroom sink, couch cushions. Now it stayed with her. Always. Face down, if it was on the table. Screen angled away if she was texting. Notifications hidden. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But noticing something and saying something are not the same thing. Because once you say it, you force reality to answer. And I wasn't sure I was ready for the answer. So I told myself the usual things. She was stressed, work was demanding, marriage goes through phases, people change. That night, sitting at the company dinner, I realized I had been doing what people do when they're afraid of the truth. I had been explaining the evidence away. Emily introduced me to a few people when we arrived. Short introductions, clean, professional. "This is my husband, Daniel." That was it. No warmth, no hand on my arm, no small smile in my direction. Just my name and my role. Then she moved on. I didn't take it personally at first. That was how these events worked. But then I noticed him. Mark. I had heard the name before. Not often, not directly, just in passing. Mark handled the client call. Mark caught an issue in the report. Mark thinks the new project might expand. Always professional, always casual, always nothing. He was sitting 2 seats away from her, not beside her. That would have been too obvious. Not across from her, too direct, 2 seats away, close enough to share small comments, far enough to look innocent. He was confident in a quiet way, not loud, not trying too hard. That bothered me more. Men who are trying to impress everyone are easy to dismiss. Men who know exactly who they're impressing are harder to ignore. I watched the first glance happen by accident. At least, that's what I told myself. Someone at the table was telling a story about a client who accidentally joined a video call with his microphone on. People laughed politely. Emily smiled, but before she laughed, she looked at Mark. Just for a second. Then she laughed. That order mattered. She checked his reaction first, then gave hers. I felt something tighten in my chest, not anger, recognition, the kind that comes before proof. I kept watching, carefully. I didn't stare. I didn't make it obvious. I just paid attention. That's when the pattern became visible. She didn't look at him often, but when she did, it was timed. Short glance, away, half smile, sip of wine, back into conversation. He did the same, not nervous, not eager, comfortable, practiced. That was the word I kept coming back to. Practiced. This wasn't new energy. This wasn't two coworkers accidentally enjoying a conversation. This was people managing something. At one point, Emily reached for her glass at the same time he reached for his. Their hands didn't touch, but they both smiled like something had almost happened. Nobody else noticed. I did, because I was the only person in the room with a reason to. The dinner continued, course after course, small talk, work stories, people talking about travel, clients, market trends, promotions. I played my part. I smiled. Answered questions, made comments when needed, but the entire time, I was watching my wife become someone I didn't recognize. Not because she was different with them, because she was different with him. About halfway through dinner, Mark said something quietly. I didn't hear the words. Emily did. She lowered her eyes and smiled. Not a polite smile, not a public smile, a private one. That smile hurt more than if she had touched his hand. Because I knew that smile, or I used to. That used to be mine. A few minutes later, she excused herself. Just taking a quick call, she said. She didn't look at me when she said it. She stood up, took her phone, and walked toward the hallway near the restrooms. I kept my eyes on my plate. 5 seconds passed. Then Mark checked his phone. 10 seconds later, he stood up. Excuse me, he said to no one in particular. He walked in the same direction, not quickly. That would have looked suspicious. Not slowly either, just casual enough to be insulting. That was the moment I stopped wondering. I waited, not because I was calm, because I wanted to be precise. If I stood up immediately, maybe I'd catch nothing. Maybe I'd look paranoid. Maybe they'd hear me. So, I counted slowly. 1, 2, 3. All the way to 30. Then I placed my napkin on the table, stood up, and walked toward the hallway. No rush, no emotion on my face. Just movement. The hallway was dimmer than the dining room, quieter. A narrow corridor with framed black and white photos on the wall, and a small turn near the end that led toward the restrooms and a side exit. I heard voices before I saw them, low, controlled. I stopped before the corner. Emily's voice came first. I told you, not here. Then Mark. You've been avoiding me all week. I haven't. You have. A pause. Then Emily said something I will never forget. I just need more time. Time. That word landed hard, because it didn't sound like work. It didn't sound like nothing. It sounded like a decision being delayed. I stayed still, barely breathing. Mark lowered his voice. How much time? I didn't move, not yet, because one sentence can be misunderstood. One phrase can be explained away. One quiet conversation in a hallway can be turned into anything if the person telling the story is good enough. And Emily was good enough, so I stayed where I was, just behind the corner, close enough to hear, far enough not to be seen. Mark spoke again. How much more time do you need? Emily exhaled. I knew that sound. I had heard it at home when she was trying to avoid a conversation. Tired, frustrated. Not because she didn't understand the question, because she didn't want to answer it. This isn't simple, she said. It could be. No, it couldn't. Only because you keep making it complicated. There was a short silence. Then Emily said, quieter, he's here. That word should have meant me. Her husband, the man sitting at the table pretending not to notice the way she smiled at someone else. But in her mouth, it sounded like a problem, an obstacle, something in the way. Mark answered fast. I know he's here. Then act like it. Another pause. Then he said, you didn't act like it last week. That was enough. I didn't need more. Not because I had proof, because I had clarity. And clarity changes the way you stand, the way you breathe, the way you decide what comes next. I could have stepped around the corner right then. I could have confronted them in the hallway, made a scene, demanded answers, forced her to explain why another man was talking about last week like it belonged to him. But that would have been emotional, And emotional gives people room. Room to cry, room to deny, room to say I misunderstood, room to make me look unstable in the hallway of her company dinner. So, I did the opposite. I turned around quietly, walked back to the table, sat down, picked up my glass, and smiled when someone asked if everything was all right. Fine, I said. And for the rest of the dinner, I became exactly what Emily thought I was, unaware, comfortable, predictable. She and Mark returned separately. Of course they did. He came back first, sat down, took a drink, didn't look at me. Emily came back about 2 minutes later. She touched my shoulder lightly as she passed behind me. A performance, a small public gesture, not for me, for the table. You okay? She asked. I looked up at her. Yeah. You? She held my gaze for half a second too long. Fine. She sat down. The dinner continued. But something had changed, not in her, in me. Before that hallway, I had been watching because I suspected something. After it, I was watching because I knew there was something to find. There's a difference. Suspicion makes you restless. Knowledge makes you patient. I stopped trying to interpret every glance. I didn't need to. Now I watched the bigger picture. Who avoided whom? Who got tense when someone mentioned spouses? Who checked their phone after the other person moved? Who relaxed when attention shifted away? Emily kept playing her part. So did Mark. But now, because I wasn't trying to convince myself anymore, their mistakes were obvious. At one point, a senior partner asked Mark if he was bringing anyone to the next client retreat. Mark smiled and said, "Not sure yet." Emily looked down at her plate. Not much, just enough. Later, someone joked about how office romances always ended badly. A few people laughed. Mark didn't. Emily didn't either. I did. That was the only time both of them looked at me at once. I let my smile stay just a little too long. Not enough to reveal anything, enough to make them wonder. By the time dinner ended, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to confront her that night. Not in the car, not at home, not emotionally. I needed facts. Because people like Emily don't admit things when they are cornered. They admit only what they think you can prove. Everything else becomes tone, context, misunderstanding, overreaction. I had lived with her long enough to know that. On the drive home, she was quiet, not the peaceful kind, the calculating kind. She looked out the window, phone in her lap, fingers resting on the screen. I drove, said nothing. After 10 minutes, she asked, "You were quiet tonight." I kept my eyes on the road. Was I? Yes. Long dinner. She glanced at me. You seemed distant. I almost laughed. Distant. That was interesting. She could sit across from me and look at another man like he knew secrets I didn't, but my silence was the problem. "I'm tired," I said. She didn't answer right away. Then, "Did something happen?" There it was, the test, not concern, a check. She needed to know whether I had seen anything, heard anything, understood anything. I gave her nothing. No. She watched me for a few more seconds, then turned back toward the window. When we got home, she went upstairs first. I stayed in the kitchen, poured a glass of water, let the house settle into silence. Then I heard it. Her voice upstairs, low, careful, on the phone. I didn't go up, I didn't listen at the door, I didn't need to make a desperate move. Instead, I went to the small office near the living room, opened my laptop, and started writing. Dates, times, details, not emotional details. Concrete ones, the dinner, the seating, the hallway, the words I heard. I just need more time. He's here. You didn't act like it last week. Everything. A record. People underestimate records. They think truth is about a dramatic reveal. Usually it isn't. Truth is a timeline, and whoever builds the clearest timeline usually controls the outcome. Over the next week, I changed nothing. That was the hardest part. I kissed her goodbye. I asked normal questions. I answered normally. I didn't check her phone in front of her. I didn't accuse her. I didn't ask about Mark. Because once people know you were watching, they become better liars. I wanted her comfortable. Comfort makes people careless. The first mistake came 2 days later. A notification on her tablet. She had left it on the kitchen island while taking a shower. Normally, I wouldn't have looked, but normally, my wife wouldn't be whispering in restaurant hallways with another man. The screen lit up. No name, just initials. M. The message preview said, "Last night was too risky. We need to be smarter." I stood there and looked at it, not touching the tablet, not opening it, just reading the preview. Then I took a photo with my phone, clear, timestamp, visible. I walked away before she came downstairs. When she entered the kitchen, towel around her hair, she saw the tablet and reached for it immediately, too quickly. I pretended not to notice. "Coffee?" I asked. She looked at me, then at the tablet, then back at me. "Sure." Her voice was normal, her eyes were not. That evening, she said she had to work late. I nodded. "Big project? Client revisions. Need dinner? No, I'll grab something." "Okay." No questions, no suspicion, no resistance. She looked almost disappointed. That told me something important. She had expected me to feel something, jealousy, concern, curiosity. Instead, she got acceptance. And acceptance is very uncomfortable for people who rely on your emotional reactions to measure control. She left at 7:12. I waited exactly 12 minutes. Then I left too. I didn't follow closely. Close following is for people in movies. In real life, you keep distance. You let traffic hide you. You let the person lead. Emily didn't go to the office. She drove across town to a hotel lounge near the financial district. Not a cheap place. Not romantic in an obvious way. A business hotel. The kind of place where two coworkers could meet and pretend there was a reason. I parked across the street, watched her enter. 10 minutes later, Mark arrived. Different entrance, same building, no hesitation, no checking around. Again, comfort. Again, practice. I didn't go in immediately. I waited. Then I walked inside like I belonged there. Hotels are easy that way. Confidence gets you past most places. The lounge was dim, a few people at the bar, small tables, soft music. I saw them near the back, not touching, not openly, but close. Too close for people who had nothing to hide. Emily leaned forward as she spoke. Mark listened like he had heard this argument before. I took a seat far enough away that they wouldn't notice me unless they were looking. They weren't. That was useful. I ordered coffee. Then I opened my phone and began recording audio. Not for court, not yet. For memory, for accuracy. Because when your life starts changing, details blur. I didn't want blur. I wanted precision. Their voices were low, but occasionally clear. Emily said, "I can't keep doing this." Mark replied, "Then don't." She said, "You say that like it's easy." He said, "You're the one who keeps going home to him." I watched her face. She looked offended. Not because he was wrong, because he said the quiet part aloud. Then she said, "I need to make sure this is real." That sentence told me everything about her state of mind. She wasn't choosing him. She wasn't choosing me. She was testing both outcomes. And I was the safety net. I paid for the coffee, left before they did, and drove home. No confrontation, not yet. When she came in that night, she acted exhausted, dropped her bag, took off her shoes. "Long day," she said. I looked up from the couch. "Client revisions?" She paused, just a fraction. "Yeah." I nodded. "Must be a difficult client." She looked at me carefully. "What does that mean?" "Nothing." She stood there for another second, then went upstairs. The next morning, I called a lawyer. His name was Marcus Hale, a divorce attorney recommended by a friend who had gone through something ugly and come out with most of his sanity. Marcus had a calm voice, no dramatic promises, no fake sympathy. Exactly what I wanted. I explained the situation: company dinner, hallway, tablet message, hotel lounge. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "You need to understand something. Infidelity itself may or may not affect the outcome, depending on circumstances. But deception, financial behavior, records, communications, and conduct matter." "I'm not trying to punish her emotionally," I said. "Good, don't. Emotional punishment makes people careless in the wrong way. I want clean." "Then act clean. Document. Don't threaten. Don't send angry messages. Don't confront unless you're prepared for what comes after. And don't leave the marital home without a plan." "I haven't." "Good." He paused. "Do you have shared accounts?" "Yes." "Business interests?" "Yes." "Property?" "Yes." Then we moved carefully. That was the beginning of the real process. Not revenge, not panic. Process. I met him the next day, brought notes, photos, financial records. He reviewed everything, then looked at me. She thinks she's managing you. Yes, that's useful. How? People who think they're in control keep behaving naturally. He was right, so I let her. For another week, I stayed calm. I watched her grow more comfortable, more careless. She started mentioning Mark again casually, testing the sound of his name around me. Mark said the client might extend the contract. Mark thinks the new director is impossible. Mark sent over the revised deck. Always professional, always nothing. But now I heard the effort, the careful casualness. The way people mention what they're hiding so it looks ordinary. I answered normally. Sounds good. Interesting. Must be busy. She relaxed a little more each time. Then came the company dinner follow-up event. Not as formal, smaller, drinks and networking at a rooftop bar. Spouses optional. Emily didn't invite me. That was the first mistake. She mentioned it in passing. We have a work thing Thursday. Spouses going? Not really. It's mostly internal. I nodded. Okay. She watched me. Again, waiting. Again, getting nothing. Thursday evening, she dressed carefully. Not like a normal work event. Like someone expecting to be seen. When she left, I waited 20 minutes. Then I went too. Not inside at first. I stayed across the street near the entrance. People came and went. Employees, clients, some spouses, despite what she said. That detail mattered. Spouses optional did not mean spouses absent. She had simply made sure I wasn't there. I saw Mark arrive at 8:05. Emily arrived at 8:17. They did not enter together, but they looked at each other before entering. Just once. That was enough. I went inside 20 minutes later. The rooftop bar was crowded enough to make surveillance easy. I took a place near the far side, partially behind a column, and watched. They were careful at first. Very careful. Different groups, different conversations. But as the night went on, drinks softened the room. People became louder, less observant. Emily and Mark became less careful. He stood behind her at one point, close enough that his hand almost touched her back. It didn't. But she leaned into the space anyway. That was worse, because it was automatic. At around 9:30, they disappeared toward the service hallway. Not the main exit, not the restrooms, a side corridor near the private event rooms. I followed after counting to 40. Same rule as before, never immediate. The hallway was narrow and quieter. I heard them before I saw them. Emily's voice tense. You said you were going to stop pushing. Mark replied, I'm tired of being hidden, she said, and I'm tired of being pressured. You told me you were going to talk to him. I am. When? Silence. Then she said, soon. Mark laughed softly, not amused. Soon means never with you. That's when I stepped into view. They both turned. Emily's face changed first. Shock, then calculation. Mark's expression hardened, not fear, annoyance. Like I had interrupted something that belonged to him. I looked at Emily, then at Mark, then back at Emily. Nobody spoke for 3 seconds. That silence was important, because innocent people fill silence quickly. Guilty people calculate. Emily spoke first. Daniel, I nodded. Emily, Mark straightened. Everything okay? I looked at him. That's an interesting question. Emily stepped forward. This isn't what it looks like. I almost smiled, because they always say that, even when nobody has described what it looks like. What does it look like? I asked. She blinked. What? You said it isn't what it looks like, so tell me what you think I'm seeing. She didn't answer. Mark said, We were just talking. Good, I said. Then keep talking. Neither of them did. Emily's eyes moved toward the main room. She was worried about the audience. Not me, not the marriage, the audience. That gave me my next move. I kept my voice calm. Don't worry, I'm not going to make a scene. Relief flickered across her face. Small, quick, disgusting. Then I added, Not tonight. That relief disappeared. Mark looked at Emily. Emily looked at me. For the first time, she wasn't sure what I knew. Good. Uncertainty is useful when you've been living under someone else's deception. I turned and walked away. Back through the hallway, back through the crowd, out of the building. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. By the time I got home, she had called twice. I didn't answer. Then came the message. We need to talk before this gets out of hand. I read it, sent it to Marcus, no reply. Another message. You misunderstood what you saw. Another, please don't embarrass me at work. There it was, not, I'm sorry, not, I hurt you, not, we need to be honest. Please don't embarrass me. Exposure, image, control, the same pattern. Marcus called the next morning. You ready? Yes. We file first. Then we decide how much pressure to apply. Do it. Once she's served, stay disciplined. I will. You say that now. I mean it. He paused. I believe you. That afternoon, we filed divorce, asset protection, request for records, clear separation of communications, everything formal, everything clean. Emily was served the next morning at work. I didn't choose the location. The process server did. But the fact that it happened there was appropriate, because work was where she had built the lie. Work was where she had performed being untouchable. Work was where Mark existed. And now, work was where reality arrived. My phone started ringing at 10:14. Emily, then again, then messages. You served me at my office? You couldn't even talk to me first? Do you know how humiliating that was? I stared at the word, humiliating. There it was again. No mention of betrayal, no concern about the marriage, just the damage to her image. I forwarded everything to Marcus, no reply. At 11:02, Mark texted me. I don't know how he got my number. The message said, "You're making a mistake." I read it twice, then forwarded that too. Marcus replied almost immediately, "Do not respond." I didn't, because by then I understood something clearly. This was no longer about whether Emily had betrayed me. That was established. This was about whether she could still control the ending. And I had already decided she couldn't. When Emily got served at her office, everything changed. Not for me, for her. Because for the first time, this wasn't something she could control. That evening, she was already waiting for me at home, sitting at the kitchen table, same place where she used to act like everything was normal. But this time, nothing about her was calm. You filed for divorce? She said the moment I walked in. Yes. Without even talking to me? I looked at her. We already talked, at that dinner. That wasn't a conversation, she snapped. No, I said calmly. That was you getting caught. She stood up. You're blowing this out of proportion. That sentence almost made me laugh. Out of proportion? I repeated. You were building another relationship while asking me to stay quiet. I wasn't building anything, she said quickly. It wasn't serious. That's worse, I replied. Silence. Because now, she didn't have a good version of the story. It didn't mean anything, she said. I shook my head slowly. Then you destroyed everything. For nothing. That hit harder than anger ever could, because now she had to face it, not the betrayal, the stupidity of it. I was confused, she said quietly. No, I replied. You were careful. She looked up at me. What does that mean? It means you knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't think I'd act on it. That was the truth. She didn't expect consequences. She expected me to stay, to wait, to give her time, to be the safe option, while she figured out if the other one was better. You didn't even try to fix this, she said. I looked at her for a long second. I tried for months, I said. You just didn't notice. Silence, heavy, because deep down, she knew it was true. I ended it with him, she said suddenly. I didn't react. That was the moment she realized. That information didn't matter anymore. Do you hear me? She said. I ended it. I believe you, I said calmly. And that's it? She asked. Yes. After everything we had? I nodded once. After everything you did? That was the difference. She kept talking about the past. I was looking at the present. You're just going to walk away? She said. No, I replied. You asked for distance. I'm giving it to you. She stared at me. That line hit harder than anything else, because now she understood. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I agreed, and that made it final. You're ruining everything, she said. I shook my head. No, I just stopped pretending nothing was wrong. That was the moment it ended. Not when she got served, not at the dinner, right there, when she realized she wasn't in control anymore. A week later, I moved out. No drama, no fights, no long conversations, just quiet decisions. And that's what hurt her the most, not losing me, losing access to me. Because that's what she actually wanted, control, the ability to step away and still have me there. But once I stepped back completely, there was nothing left to hold on to. The last message she sent me said, "I didn't think you'd really leave." I read it once, then deleted it, because that was the truth of everything. She didn't think I'd leave. She thought I'd stay available. And that was her biggest mistake, because sometimes the strongest move you can make is not to fight for someone, but to accept exactly what they asked for and walk away. Thank you for staying till the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the pinned comment. It really means a lot to me.